Welcome back to the PHP Virtual World tutorials. In this tutorial, I will show you how to use media prims to take advantage of bringing the internet into the virtual world. So let's get started. First thing we're going to do is build a basic block, which I'm sure is an easy task for all of you. Simply build the block, and we will go into the texture tab. In the texture tab, we will select textures, and we will change the texture to default media texture. This will just be a gray texture that will later allow us to add media to it, which we will do. This is Second Life Viewer 2 in case you guys were not aware. This will be required for this tutorial for any of this to actually work. People not using this viewer will not be able to see the media even if you apply it in this viewer. So we'll select this media, default media texture, and we'll go down to the bottom where it says media. If you click the plus sign, it will tell you to select faces that you wish to texture. If I click OK right now, it'll texture all the faces, but that seems a little unnecessary. So we will go into select face and just click this front face, and we'll go down to add again. So as you can see, we can put in any website we want to set as the starting media website. So we'll just use Google for now. As you can see, it'll give you a preview of the page that you're about to display on your box, and if you hit apply, then the website will now be displayed on the box. It's very small right now, so I'm going to stretch this box out, make it a little bigger for you, and there you go. I think all of you can see that. So now we have Google on our box, and you can change it to any website you want up here, and if you click home, it'll go back to whatever you set your page is. So it would go back to Google for me, and this little plus sign will zoom onto the media and give you a nice square view of it, and this will open the URL that you're currently at in your browser. So it works just like any normal browser. If you click in here, you can search for whatever you want. So I'll search for PHP. It'll bring me up the Google results. So now you have a fully functioning browser in your Second Life box, and this is very useful for, you can show videos, all types of different things. There's lots of uses for these media prims, but the one we're going to show is how to utilize the PHP scripts through them. So I'll just go ahead and show you a sample program that I made. This program is very basic, and it's basically just going to take two inputs, your first and your last name, and it's going to store it in a file for you. So this is basically a way to check to see who all has been, say you're trying to take attendance, or you want to check to see who's came to your PHP object thing. It's a great way to do that. It's also a great way to store whatever information you want. It's a great way to gather information. And we'll go ahead and get started. I'll show you what the website looks like first. So if I go to the website I created, it's basically just two fields where you can input your first and last name, and then a submit button which will store them in the database. As you can see, this is just basic HTML. You don't really need to know HTML that much except for the use of forms, which I'll basically explain here, so it's nothing that it'll be all too difficult. So basically HTML is just a series of tags. These tags are surrounded by these greater than and less than signs, and you always end your tag with a closing tag, which is the same thing but it has a slash before it. So you can also open and close a tag at the same time, which is what you see me do here several times. So this form tag is used in combination with an action. This action is what you'll specify the PHP page for the information to be posted to. So whatever you're going to call your PHP page, that goes here under this action. And then the method, if you're familiar with posting in PHP, there's a get and a post, which is mostly about privacy, but it doesn't really matter for us in this case, so we're just going to use the get method. But for the input, you have a variety of types that you can use. This is text, which is simply a text box, as you see over here. There's radio buttons, there's drop-down menus, there's lots of stuff you can choose between. But for now, we're just going with a basic text box, and then you specify the name of the field. So this field is just going to be called first for first name, and this field is exactly the same. It's going to be called last for last name. As you can see, I have this BR tag in between these two. This is simply creating a new line. So otherwise, they would be side by side right here. Everything would be in a line. But this BR tag basically is like an enter key, and it moves it down to this next line. So I also, at the end, you want a submit button. So this is the type of submit. You can change the text to say OK, enter, or whatever you want by specifying other fields, but just like this is type text, this is type submit, and it gives you this nice button that they can click to basically, when they click the submit button, it executes the action, which will take them to the PHP page, and it will use the get method to post this data. So after the data is posted, you see we go to the save.php page. So we'll go to that next. This php_save is basically just takes the data that you just posted from your form and is going to store it in a file. So I don't know if you are familiar with flat file databases, but essentially what they are is it's just a text file that is used to store data with some sort of indicator that separates one piece of data from the next. In this case, I'm just using this straight up and down bar, which is above the slash key on your keyboard near enter. And it's not used very often. I mean, no one has this in their name, so it's a great separator. And you can basically use whatever you want. You can use an exclamation point, a parenthesis, an and symbol. So you can use any separator you want. This is just the one that I chose. Now, the great thing about flat file databases is that you basically are just storing data in a text file. So it's very easy. You're just reading and writing to a text file. It's very quick. It's very easy to look at your data. You don't have to mess around with running a database and accessing the database with all these advanced calls and that type of thing. It's just very simple, straightforward. And so as you can see here, I've created this flatfile.data.txt. It's an empty text file. That's all it's going to be right now. And basically, you can call it whatever you want. I just called it flat file data because it's my flat file database, so I know what it is. Makes it easy to remember. And you just want it to be a text file, but it can be whatever you want. And this fopen is a built-in PHP function that will open your text file to do a variety of things. Now, this last character is going to specify what the fopen function is going to do. So this A represents that I want to open it at the end of the file and write to the file. So we'll also use an R later on for reading from a file. But for now, we want to write to the end of the file, so we're going to keep adding on data to the end of the file, which is why we use the A. Now, we'll store this in the FP variable, which will let us know information about the file that we have opened. So the first thing I like to do is check to make sure the file in fact was open. So if the file wasn't open, then we're not going to want to do anything. We're just going to want to exit, and it's also nice to let yourself know that you had an error. So this is the not symbol. It basically makes this the opposite of what it is. So right now, if it was open, this would be saying true. So we want it to be not true, which would be false. So if this was false, then we want to output an error, which says the file could not be opened. And we want to exit the program because we're not going to be able to write to the file and do any of this other stuff, which will simply give us errors if we try to do it without exiting. So the next built-in PHP function is the fwrite. Fwrite basically allows you to specify the file that you opened earlier. It must be open before you can write to it. And you specify the given file, and then you specify a string of data that you want to write to. Now for us, we're using this get method, which is also another PHP method, which gets the data from the URL. So they're connected with the use of AND statement and the AND symbol, and it'll list the data field equals and then a value, and it basically just pulls it straight from that, and it'll grab this will basically just grab the data. So this returns just the string that we're looking for here. And then this period is basically just a plus symbol. It basically combines these two strings together. So this is giving us the string that has the first name, which first is just first because that's what we set it as, and this. So if you change this name to something besides first, this needs to be changed to that same thing. It doesn't have to be first, it can be whatever you want. They just have to be the same. And as you can see, last is the same as last. So basically, this period is combining this string that we got from the get method and this string here at the end. It basically just combines the two together to make it into one string. And you'll see we did that again down here. But this character, as I said, we're going to be using just to separate data. So we have to use something to separate the first name and the last name. I mean, you could just use a space if you wanted, but some things actually have spaces in them, so I like to use a character that's not used very often to separate my data. And then down here, we'll add on the last name, which will basically, if you don't do any sort of enter, it basically just writes it right on after. So if I would have done another dot and then just use get last, then it would work exactly the same as if I called fwrite again. So I'm just calling fwrite again here so I know that I'm doing first and last, so I can clearly see what I'm inputting into my database. And then I'm also adding on to the end here this /n, which basically is the same as the enter key. So this is how you specify that you want a new line. So it'll also add a new line, so the next time I enter data into my database, it'll be on the next line, and it won't just be all mashed into one line on my database. And lastly, you always want to close the file that you opened earlier, and I like to give myself a message that just says echo data received. This way you know that your program actually did something and you're not just staring at a white screen wondering if it worked or not, because that can be very frustrating if it's not working but you're just getting a white screen and you don't know what's going on. So this is my save function, and of course it saves into the flat file database.